businesses.
Okay. Well, yeah, just do it, I guess. Yes, we'll go over the Jane Bloodworth one. Do you have it on your computer?
Yep.
Okay. So, all right. So we're changing the whole basically sort of premise of what we're doing in the sales appointments to some extent, based on like me and Mr. Turdy on Friday. It's what you and I talked about. Going over what he's doing. What we were presenting before was the Tom Caffarella thing more, which was like, you've got two windows of opportunity. You have the retail window of opportunity that's at this price. You have the investment window of opportunity that's at that price. And then going through both options. So on the investment side, you have a certainty of a specific close date that you can count on. You don't have to worry about contingencies. You're going to have a slightly lower price. On the retail side, you're going to have to deal with more uncertainty, the possibility of someone doing a home inspection and saying they want $7,000 from you because the roof is bad, and the deal potentially falling through because of that. People going through your house and doing showings and inconveniencing you and so on and so forth, but you get a slightly higher price. So instead of sort of like that way of doing it and of talking about the fact that, we have both the investment side and the brokerage side. So instead of that, we're doing it in a way where we're positioning ourselves in like sales. Is that working?
Yeah, I ran out of space. I'm erasing some stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ran out of space.
And Andrew, thank you for the prep.
It should be good.
Excellent, Andrew. And so we're positioning ourselves as what in sales is like a reluctant buyer. So does anybody know what a reluctant buyer, what that means?
Yes.
Berta knows.
We don't need the deal. We're here to do you a favor.
We don't need the deal. We're here to do you a favor. And what else? So that's part of it. What else? So like you go and buy a car and the guy's like, oh, you say, oh, like, what's the deal with this car? And he just seems sort of like, he's explaining it to you and he's nice, but he seems sort of like indifferent if you're going to buy it or not. And in fact, he tells you, well, have you done all your research? Have you looked at like the Toyota dealership and the Honda dealership as well? I want to make sure you're like well informed. Like, are you sure this really is the right like car for you? Right? And you're sort of like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be selling me stuff. Why are you actively like not selling me things? So that's like the reluctant buyer, kind of frame. So that's basically what we're trying to do now. And so all that said, so basically like, so we're explaining and leveraging our investment experience like a lot more now than what we were previously. And we're downplaying the fact that we have the brokerage. So we still, of course, mention that we're licensed and all that stuff. But we're not saying, we're building out a brokerage. We've done 42 listings in the last 3 months. Like we're not saying that stuff. We're trying to position ourselves as their expert advisor, someone that has a lot of expertise in selling houses from selling hundreds of our own houses. And unfortunately for Mr. Seller, your house doesn't fit exactly what we're looking for from a cash perspective, or we're not quite sure if that's what we're looking for from a cash perspective. It isn't the normal profile. But, since we're already here, I'm happy to at least give you our experience and advice in what is most important for you to think about when selling your house, to help you out. And we'll still explore if we can buy it. We'd still love to buy it, but it's just not quite the right profile for us. And so we're explaining about like a lot of the pitfalls that somebody might, sort of have in selling a house through an agent. And the important things to consider. So like the important price is one of the big ones, of course, right, which we've talked about before. And we'll explain to them how the pricing works. If you get the pricing right at the beginning, then you, or even price it slightly under market, you often in this market have a better opportunity to get a better price than if you try to get the aggressive price at the beginning when it's more likely to sit. So we sort of will explain about the pricing thing. We'll explain about like paying for Zillow and Trulia ads and how we do that $12,000 a month to sell our own houses, to get the preeminent sort of like property placement there and get like the most possible like eyeballs basically on the house. Because now, Mr. Seller, the houses are driven by the buyers. The buyers find the houses they want to see and they talk to their agents. It's not driven by the agents anymore like it was before, where the agent finds the house for the person, because now it's all like public. So if you're not paying for this like premier placement in Redfin and Trulia, or Redfin, sorry, Zillow and Trulia, it's a lot harder to, you're not getting as much exposure, so you're not going to get as good of a price. You're not going to sell it as quickly that way. And we do that at $12,000 a month because we have to maximize the investment on our properties that we're renovating. Typical agents aren't gonna do that. That's just, they're, so okay. So let me pause there. So that's sort of a bit of a rant, but like that's kind of the idea behind it. Basically, is like we're sharing our expertise, our experience as the investor in selling 184 houses in the last 5 years. That's what we're saying, is 184 in the last 5 years, which is roughly correct. And then 52 in the last 12 months. But we're not also doing it in their face like, oh yeah, we sold 194 houses in the last 5 years. We're sort of throwing it away. We're like, well, in the last 5 years, I think it was like 184 or something like that houses that we've sold. Here's what we found to be most important to get the top price. And so we're contrasting ourselves as an expert in selling houses for maximum value to a typical agent who generally is more of sort of a salesperson. They're trying to sort of close the deal and then do sort of as little work as possible in reality after that, and just basically put on the MLS and wait for someone else to sell it. What most agents are going to do. So we're contrasting what we do with what agents do, but without trying to make it seem like we're trying to compete to list their house.
So if I can say,
Yeah.
The reluctant buyer piece is really specific to the listing side, right? So like, it's not the MO with going after cash, looking at cash deals. It's specific to our pitch for the listing. So, we're still going to approach the cash deals like we have in the past, and we'll talk about that separately. But the positioning here is for trying to land the listing if that's what you think the appropriate outcome of the appointment is.
And so the idea is that after, and again, we're shooting for 2 hours, basically is like what we're going to do. And Mark, we noticed we listened to a recording that you did a good job with that in a recent one a couple days ago. And basically in the 2 hours, about an hour should be like be report building. And so part of that's going to be like in the walkthrough, and then part of that's going to be like when you're actually sitting down and explaining all these different aspects they need to consider when selling their house, and basically educating them and sharing our experiences in selling our houses. And then you're going back and forth to rapport, so it's like an hour on rapport building, and then sort of like roughly like an hour, and ideally it's like 2 hours total. But so after establishing a lot of rapport and trust and then credibility and expertise by like explaining all these things from the perspective of us as an investor, then at the end, the idea is that the seller then, because we've mentioned we also occasionally will sell houses for other people. Well, we'll occasionally we'll throw that in different places that we'll list or we'll sell houses for other people. From time to time, it's not like our sort of core of what we do, but we'll do that. But we do that from time to time. At the end of it, we want the seller to bring up that they want us to, would you also sell my house? Right? So we're saying we have this like amazing home selling sort of process or system, essentially, without saying those words, from selling 184 houses, which is much, much more than any agent has done. And plus, we just care a lot more about getting maximum value than typical agent's going to. The agent cares about getting the deal closed. They care about signing you up as a listing, get their sales numbers. They want to get the house sold, but like they're making 3% of it. So whether they get 200,000 or 190,000, it has almost no impact on what they're going to get paid. So just human self-interest. Like they're not in the business of focusing on how to get top dollar for houses. They're in the business of trying to figure out how to sell people to get them to use them as a listing agent. Us, because we're investors, our entire return on investment hinges on getting the maximum value we can for our properties. And so that's sort of the frame that we're kind of coming from, and that's where we're sharing our experience with them. So even though, Mr. Seller, it doesn't look like something that is going to be the ideal fit for us cash-wise, we'd still love to make you the offer, we'd still love to buy it, but it just doesn't seem like really the great fit. We need houses that have to stress, sellers that have some motivation. Even though it doesn't, we're happy to share with you our experience, what we found to be critical in us maximizing the value on the houses that we're selling. And sort of in the process, we're sort of pointing out some of those things about agents. And we'll put scripting and stuff together around what those things are. And then we're hoping that through that process at the end, they're like, I mean, would you guys just do it for me? Would you guys be willing to sell the house? That's what we're hoping to get to, right? After like the 2-hour sort of process. So it's like a little more, it's a little more tricky to pull this off to some extent, but we also can differentiate ourselves much more than when we're just saying, oh, we have a brokerage as well. We can also sell your house for you. And then we're just kind of like just another agent in their mind. So this allows us to have a unique position as true real estate experts that agents just they're not going to be. I mean, they're salespeople. It's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, it's not bad about that. There's nothing wrong with selling with an agent, but it's just a totally different like level of expertise in selling and getting the highest price, the best value for property that we have compared to what an agent is going to have. And we would consider, you wouldn't say it like quite this absurdly, but we would consider selling your house as well. It's not like we don't make the most money that way, right? Because we don't. We make the most money on our investment. But if it's something you want us to do, we'd be open to do that for you.
So then I think it's, part of it is that you're positioning yourself as an investor and you have expertise in real estate, like John said, right? So you're coming from that position versus, which is a more favorable platform than just coming in as an agent. I think people will view you as a little differently if you're only positioning yourself as an investor. The other thing that is accomplished by doing this is, if you sit down and you say, this house is a lot nicer than, many of the houses that we normally purchase. There's something we'd still like to buy. There's some things we could do, but let me ask you, have you talked to another agent or whatever? And then you start the conversation from the vantage point of, I'm an investor, I'm interested in buying your house, but I'm not so sure that this one's going to work. But now I'm here, I'm interested to know what your situation is. Why don't you tell me? You talked to another agent or your nephew's an agent or whatever the case may be. What did they tell you? And then you start a dialogue with, which in theory they're going to be a lot more candid with you about the conversations they've had with other people, agents, or what their thoughts are on selling the house, because they're talking to you like you're an investor, like you're not competing for the listing as an agent, right? So they're going to be.
They don't feel like you're trying to sell them.
Yeah, you're just asking them what's going on. They're going to be more open than if you're coming in, hey, I'm an agent, I also want your business, right? Because they've, in many cases they've already had that conversation a few times. So you want to you're sort of demonstrating expertise by positioning yourself as an investor and all the things that come with that. And B, you're also kind of taking some pressure off of them by not selling them, which tends to get them to open up more about what they actually want. And then once you kind of get that information, then you're in a much better position towards the end of the meeting to try and close it for whatever it may be.
So that's kind of our differentiator is we're investors, basically. So it's a whole different kind of thing. It's going to be, especially like Mark, because we trained you on it initially in a different way. It's going to be like it's going to be an adjustment. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I kind of feel like that's the approach I've been taking most of the time, just because I do know in the back of my mind that the ones I'm going on aren't going to be cash listings. So it's more just like having a third-party view as an investor, but then knowing that the end result is going to be to try to come in and let them know what we do on the side as well, like also listing properties the traditional methods. So. Right.
What are your thoughts though on this, that we're not even really featuring the fact that we list properties, featuring the fact that we're realtors or brokers? We'll mention that, of course, that we're licensed and whatever, but it's more like passing it to like a throwaway.
Right.
And we're really just sharing advice, sharing experiences as an investor and waiting for them to come to us and ideally start asking us questions like, wait, so how do you guys do this? Or hey, would you sell my house?
Right. I feel like it could work well and then also work poorly in some situations. Like sometimes I feel like I pretty much just need to like lay it out plain and simple, because some people wouldn't really register with them. So it's like,
what do you think wouldn't
like just like kind of like passively saying that we could list it as opposed to just being like, I mean, I've got the paperwork right here. We could get the ball rolling and get this house listed for you, see if we can get it sold.
Because you feel like some people are just too sort of like,
I think they would probably focus too much that we're investors and just once they hear that we wouldn't be able to buy the house, they kind of just like shut down, and then they don't really consider the other possibility, like we would be able to list it for them as
but
well.
even if you're kind of giving them advice, you still feel like that? Because, because you would give them advice of like, okay, like what if other, agents, like who else have you talked to about selling the house, Mr. Seller? And then we're, giving them like our advice about like what things to fix up or not fix up, like talking to them about how pricing works, and the importance of the correct price and all that stuff. Like, so if do you feel like that the people who still would not be interested to hear that stuff?
No, I think they'd be interested. I just think we would definitely need to include something that like kind of gets like a yes or no from them, basically. Like like making sure that it's clear to them that we could list their house. Like as opposed to like them coming up with the idea that like they would want us to, but like giving them that option.
Yeah, and you're mentioning it.
Yeah, I think that's more at the end.
Okay.
So like, the idea through the, a lot of the sit down meeting is just sort of moving in and out of building rapport. Like John said, maybe half the meeting is going to be rapport building in aggregate. Obviously, it's not going to be the first half. It's going to be interspersed throughout. You're going to be flowing in and out of building rapport and talking about the house. But towards the end of the meeting, if it is clearly a listing, that's when you will have hopefully demonstrated enough expertise about the different things that we do when we sell our houses that we buy as an investor, that you've shown them that, hey, if there's anything that we're good at, it's selling houses, selling our own houses. So then when you say, hey, I'd be happy, why don't we do this? Listen, I know you talked to the other day, but I'd be happy to list the house for you. We can plug you into our system. We're already paying for Redfin, Trulia, Zillow, for the premium placement. We're already doing all the things that I talked to you about. Like we have that in place. Those costs are, already occurring for us because we're selling our own houses. I'd be happy to sell the house for you to plug you into our system to get it sold. And so you're still bringing up that, it's not going to be, that you are just hoping that they ask you to list their house and you never actually ask them for the business. At the end of the meeting, if that hasn't happened organically, you are going to say, hey, why don't we just do this? I can sell it for you. And at that point, you've built a lot of rapport. And in theory, you've shown them that you're an expert. They trust you. You've been there for 2 hours. They're like, that sounds good. You have told me all these things I didn't know about selling houses. I like you. I met with this other agent. That person didn't say anything about any of these things. So I'm going to do this.
Right, but and you do it at the end more like something that you just almost like sort of thought about, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So like again, that's the whole positioning, right? So that's why we're not like closing them in this scenario, because the whole time we're just giving, saying, hey, we're investors. We're trying to buy this thing for cash, right? That's why we're here. That's the card you got, right? That's what they are expecting, right? Is to buy for cash. Okay, sometimes we're selling houses for people. At the end, and you're explaining everything, and at the end you're saying, well, yeah, I guess if you wanted us to, we could sell for you. So right, so it's more sort of like it's almost like it's just sort of like, well, I guess we could do it for you. Almost like we're reluctant to, right? Because that's not where we make most money for the business, right? It's not like sort of it's not our core focus. Our core focus is investing. We have this brokerage, we list houses for people, but our core focus is the investing side. So. But if you want us to, we'd be happy to do it. We've been sitting down with you for 2 hours. We've got to know you a bit and stuff, and I think it'd probably help you a lot if we did that. So yeah, we'd be willing to do it, right? As opposed to we're trying to close you on using us to list your house. Yeah. So it's there's some nuance to it. Yeah.
So we have we're already doing all the things that I told you about in the meeting, right? All of those things that, Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, all the things that I talked about, price discovery are things that we do for all of our own houses. We're doing it anyway. So it's not like we're, going to be like doing some great service. Like we're just saying, hey, we already have all this in place, so we can, I can do this for you. Like John said, I have a bit of now I care, about the outcome for you. Well, we can do this for you. And like, it's a big benefit to them, because that's how you should think of it. It is a benefit. We have we sell as a company a lot more houses than the average agent, so it's a big benefit, and you should position it like it is that the benefit, is that kind of benefit.
Right. We just have a much stronger vested interest again in getting the most money for the houses. Again, 3% an agent, whether it's 300 or 315 that they get you, it doesn't matter. They just want to get the house sold as quickly as possible with the least amount of effort. It's just human nature, right? I mean, they're just trying to get as many listings as they can and get them sold as quickly and easily as they can, right? But we try to maximize every house that we have because we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in each one of these houses.
So like like the example that John said, $200,000 versus $190,000 doesn't make a meaningful difference necessarily for an agent in terms of their commission, 3% of $10,300, right? But if it's our house, the difference is $10,000. So I think that's could be pretty powerful. At least you should know that in your head, right? Like that is like a real thing, right? The agents, a $10,000 difference really doesn't move the needle for an agent, but it does for us when we sell our own houses.
So just the amount of time, effort, money, brain power we're putting into how we can sell these houses for the most money. What an agent's going to do, of course, it's in our self-interest. It's just going to be more.
Yeah. Well, I went on my first appointment yesterday. Thank you. So, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk before I went because I did exactly that. I did the reluctant buyer thing. And one of the first things that the husband said to me, well, I thought you had a brokerage. You don't have a brokerage. I said, oh, yeah, we do. And just, went over, and this is how we do it. We have a system that works, and so we just repeat it. And, but the wife was also interested in, well, what if we asked you to fix it up too and sell it? I'm like, yeah, that's an option. I mean, we can propose a couple of different scenarios. But they started asking me so many questions that I didn't know how to answer around that. So we'll have to talk about details offline. But my point is, it can go in that direction too, where, wow, these guys are so good at it, fixing up and selling their own houses. Maybe we should have our house fixed up before it's sold. And not everybody's going to say that because not everybody's going to have the money to do it. But so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good sign, right? That they started asking you basically for it sounds like your advice, right? So what does that tell you, obviously, right? That you were an expert, right?
Yeah.
That you were very knowledgeable, that you were someone, once someone is looking to you as like someone here that they're trying to get advice from, and that's a much more powerful place to come from when you're influencing them to do something.
Right, but that strategy does work. I mean, I could just see the direction that it was going.
Nice.
Rather than pushing towards somebody, if you pull away, they, you attract them.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's like a magnet. You know what I mean? It's like if you have like the two polarities that are like the same or whatever, and you push it and it goes away. Push it, it goes away. But then you turn or whatever, and you pull it, like comes towards you. So that's human nature. If someone feels like you're trying to get them to do anything, it could be anything. It could be like, take this $100, Mark. I have $100. Take it.
And hard to get.
Mark, do you want it? Take this $100. Right? They're gonna be like, why are you trying to force me on this? What the hell am I have to do for this $100? Right? So it doesn't matter what it is, but if you feel that pressure to do something, the person is going to resist you. That's good.
When we're setting
Andrew.
up the appointments on the phone, I feel like we've been mentioning we have a brokerage as well. Like we can come out and give you some like a second opinion on that. Do you want us to stray away from that now that we're not positioning ourselves?
I was going to ask if you were going to change any scripting because that's a very good point. You want consistency throughout. So
Yeah, we're gonna think about that. Yeah, I mean, I would be inclined to that. I don't know. We'll still talk about that and get back to you. I mean, my inclination is probably no in mentioning it unless it just makes sense for whatever reason in the conversation too. I mean, you can just kind of throw it away like, oh yeah, we're also licensed agents as well, just so they're aware. But I wouldn't my inclination is not to emphasize it.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think, to the extent that I know that there are times that it comes up where it is, beneficial for you to say, hey, we can also provide you that service if you're like specifically asking about it. I don't think it, you know, I think it's fine just to drop it in because I don't think that people, going to have these appointments, most people are not referencing that, you know, part of the conversation. Most people don't have kind of forgotten whatever you talked about, don't really understand what we do except we're investors. Like they're not, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, oh, you're a licensed brokerage too, right? I don't think I've ever had that come up. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, but you know, I wouldn't like go crazy on it, but I think it's fine just to drop in there if you're also agents. But you know, probably not more than that.
Do you want to play some of the recording?
Sure.
When I was thinking, I was thinking we could start with like it's like around minute 54.
Want to do 54? 51?
Yeah, let's do that too. The 54 one, you go through like the costs on selling with an agent.
Sure. Okay.
But 51 is.
We'll start with 54. I'll just start it.
Yeah.
This is a meeting that ultimately is turning into a cash deal.
We sold a lot of houses, but we don't always get it right. Still, you know, it's not and associated price with it. And I'll ask once it all knows this an offer. So when we sell our houses, we
Yes, this is the whole pricing riff.
what's called, you know, Zillow. We use Zillow, and they have a coming soon feature.
Right.
And we put our house up for a week on Zillow. Because once it goes up on the MLS, once it's listed, everything is a matter of public record, like the number of days on the market. If you drop the price, everything is captured for us.
Right.
You take it off the market and put it back on. So whenever you have a house that's been on the market for 100 some days or whatever it is, and they drop the price 3 times, it's like that's not helpful. Right? You know, so you know, for us, and we have found, and through trial and error, you know, we made these mistakes too when we started, but you know, pricing it right is probably sort of the key to getting the best price. And so we'll put it on this Zillow coming soon, and we'll associate a price with it. And it's up on the internet, people can see it, but it's not listed yet. So the clock hasn't started, and there's no information that's being tracked on the MLS, et cetera. And then we have learned over time, based on how many people click and look at the house, whether or not it's priced right. So we should be getting about 100 to 120 clicks a day on the house if it's in the right price zone. And then and a lot of times we find out we're only getting, you know, only 35 people looked at it today. You know, and then we'll drop the price and get that number of views up before we actually go live as a way to do sort of price discovery to make sure that we're right on the price. And we have sold, I think it's 184 houses now. So we sold a lot of houses, but we don't always get it right still.
Right, so that's like what I mean by throwaway, right? So like at no point is it like, so it's more subtle than, you know, well, Mr. Scheller, you know, we've sold 184 houses in the last 5 years, 52 in the last 12 months alone. So we really know what we're doing when it comes to selling houses. So instead of telling someone that, he's sort of like tossing these things in almost like throwaways. So and that like builds the credibility and expertise in the person's mind without them feeling like you're like sort of forcing it. Basically, like it's just it's just more powerful. It's more just like, oh, by the way, these things are happening, than making it like we're trying to push this information on you and convince you how good we are. Like we're just explaining things to you, and through our explanation, you realize, wow, these guys really know what the hell they're doing. A lot more than a typical agent would. And maybe they'd sell my house too, because I think they do a great job.
And so in the 15, 20 minutes leading up to this segment, I'm talking to her. We're looking on the iPad, we're looking at other houses in her neighborhood that have sold. And we're talking about what we think her price, what we think her house would sell for on the market as is. And, you know, her neighbor, she lives out in Virginia, in the neighborhood. as like many other places we go to, the prices are a little bit scattered. So, she was fairly informed about what was going on with home sales in her area and knew that there was a kind of a range. And so, she wasn't totally sure what the house was worth, but so we're talking about what, she's has been thinking about what she would sell it for if she put it on the market. And so that conversation leads into, hey, well, let me just tell you what we do when we sell our houses to make sure we get pricing. And that way it's, it's not, you're not coming in cold. You're not just like saying, okay, so let me give you a tutorial on how we sell houses. It's got to be more organic than that. But in this case, we were already talking about pricing it per house, so it was pretty seamless just to say, okay, well, this is what I would do for my house. I'll just tell you that kind of thing.
Berta?
Nothing.
What do you think about it?
I'm interested in how you guys would frame this at the beginning. So would you keep the framing for the cash at the beginning of the appointment the same as it is in terms of the expectations? Hey, I'm here to make an offer in your house. We take a walk through the house. It'd be 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes, make an offer afterwards, et cetera, et cetera. Would you keep the framing the same, or would you kind of float the expectations at the beginning to sort of open the mind up to our reluctant disclosures throughout? You know what I mean?
I should say I start all my meetings by introducing myself as Bill Edwards now.
Phil Edwards Jr.
Bill Edwards Jr. Yeah. So that's a good question. I don't. Don't talk about like the listing piece at the beginning, if that's what you're saying.
Are you saying specifically for cash appointments?
I was asking, have you guys thought about whether or not you want to change the expectations at the beginning for this new posture? You know what I mean? So right now at the beginning of our cash appointments, you say, hey, this is going to be, we want to set the time, the agenda, and the outcome. We run them, however you play with that. Do we want to change anything in there with the agenda or the outcome that would float the possibility of us having other options other than the cash deal?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I sort of soft pedal the agenda a little bit myself. I do that,
Right.
But it's not, it's not as like forceful as I think, other people may do it. And we've seen some other trainings, but I certainly think that we don't need to get into anything with regard to option B at the beginning.
Okay.
That's not, at the very beginning. I don't think so.
Yeah, because the whole thing is that we're not trying to get them to list it with us, really. Like it's sort of an option.
Like what you're trying to say is like kind of like harping more like on it. It's not going to work for us. Then no worries. We don't buy all the houses we go into. Are you saying like kind of position it more like we're going to be going through analyzing the house, so it might not be something we're interested in at all? Or
I wasn't sure if you want to just mention anything. Hey, we could possibly list it, but it sounds like there's no preference to do that. We really want to keep it. We really want to keep the integrity of, hey, we do this. Yeah. It so happens. I mean, we could do this for you.
Yeah, because if you mention that up front, then they're going to be a lot more resistant in giving you information about other agents they've talked to. They're going to feel like, oh, these guys are also trying to sell me and listing the house too. So they're going to. Right, so we want to avoid that entirely. We'll mention we're licensed, mention we're brokerage, kind of throw it in at different places where appropriate, but not.
So exactly what John said, and I think you want to make sure that this is rapport is like super key with this approach because you're going to be sitting down, like it's got to be organic. You sit down, you're building rapport, you're talking to them, and for you to be sort of espousing your thoughts on real estate and this is how we would do it. Here's some pieces of advice, seller. That's not going to come off great unless you actually have rapport and they are interested and like you and want to hear what you have to say, right? So you've got to focus heavy on the rapport, and then any reference to listing, that's got to be like anything like that has got to be.
Got it.
It's not there's an art to it as well. So even if we feel pretty confident with the price, we'll still do that for a week, because it's free, it doesn't cost anything, we'll put it up for, as it coming soon for a week. Kind of ensure ourselves that we are kind of in that right price zone before we go live with it. Because we just want to sell it when we put it up. Go down.
Right.
And a kind of best case scenario, we'll put it up, get it up live, we'll have one open house for an hour and a half maybe, and we'll just try and get like everybody who's interested to come through, as many people as we can. And then if it's priced right, and you've got a lot of people who are coming in, they see each other, they know it's gonna sell, it sort of forces their hand. You kind of get everybody's best offer. Hey, put your offers in by Monday night, we'll let you know on Tuesday, you know, and then people kind of have no choice but to put in their best offer. And then you can kind of say, hey, you know, we got 4 offers, your offer is X, you know, is this your best and final, or would you like to, you know, raise it, that kind of thing. So you can kind of create a little competition.
I think you're not going to find like a seller in the world that doesn't like hearing that. I mean, there's everybody I think I've ever talked to is like nodding when you're telling them that. They love it, right? You're telling them, how can I get competition for my house and get the best price possible? What you're telling them makes complete sense, and they're going to be like, okay, like that is something that people love hearing. And so like that scripting is I think very powerful in terms of, hey, this is what we do when we want to sell our own houses. This is how you can try and get a little bit of a bidding war. And it also does you a service of, if it ends up being a listing, you're in a way you've already kind of tempered their expectations on how you should get the best price. And that's by pricing it competitively, right? So this is a way that you're sort of planting the seed for down the road that if you go out with a big number, you know, that's going to be at your detriment. So it's sort of I think it serves kind of two purposes. And then the other piece about, you know, I think when you say something like, hey, you know, we've sold a lot of houses, but we don't always get it right, so we still go through this exercise, that builds credibility. You know, you're saying, you're demonstrating that you're not, like you recognize that there is sort of some uncertainty with the market, you don't know everything, but you figured out this methodology that is sort of tried and true. And you know, you recognize enough to know that you can't, you know, always pick the best price out of a hat. So like people also tend to respond well to that because it shows that you're, you know, just as a way to demonstrate credibility. Like you're not saying, I know, we have sold so many houses that we always get the price right. That doesn't really ring true.
Yeah, the whole time is like not just saying good things, but also saying things that we don't know or things that we're not sure about. So it makes it seem like we don't have an agenda. When we do that, we're just saying, well, you know, we sold a lot of houses, but even we still don't know sometimes. It also gives them, like, if they hear that, they got to be thinking, well, these guys have sold like 180 houses and they don't know. How am I going to know? Or how is my agent going to know who's telling me what price it's going to be? And my agent didn't talk about this coming soon thing. It sounds like a good idea. They just give me a price. Like, do they even know what they're talking about? So you're planting these little seeds of doubt with agents without saying, we'd like to compete for your business, Mr. Sell, or whatever, right? So yeah, and we're going to write that scripting out as well. So there's certain things like that he's finding to work well that we're just going to write out, and that should just be memorized. And then just wherever you want to put it in the meeting, we're not going to keep it that rigid, but just, you know, just include that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we got to do that.
Yeah, there's also, you know, most agents, I think, at least from what I hear from sellers, is that agents will come in and give them a price, right? Like, I think you should list it at this price. And once you sort of, if they've already had a conversation like that with another agent, where they said, I think probably 360 is the right price to list at, then, you know, you come in and say this, that does, like John said, maybe shake their confidence a little bit in what that agent is representing. Do they really know? You know, like this person, this guy probably knows more, and he doesn't know. So just like John says, I think it also can help, you know, plant the seed of doubt about other, you know, our competitors and conversations they've had with them.
But so that's, you know, I would probably do something like 680 or 685 just to be, to try and really get some activity going around it. But I wouldn't, if you end up working with a realtor, I would.
Right, look at that, right? That's sort of like the, like you probably end up working with a realtor.
I say that like several times, like even if they've met with somebody. This woman had talked to an agent who goes to her church, and a couple times in the meeting I say, your agent or your friend or whatever at the church, like you're gonna probably go with that person, like that, that's cool, right? And then it just sort of further demonstrated it's just like such a soft sell, right? That it doesn't. There's no pressure whatsoever.
Sell with an agent. Don't care. Want to sell with an agent? Go for it.
Your funeral.
Yeah. I don't recommend it, but it's up to you.
So the good thing is a way to get more information.
Similar to the.
So then, so I said, you should, if you end up working with this agent that you talked with or whatever, I would bring this up with them, the coming soon thing.
So it's advice.
It's like, hey, this is something that you may want to raise with them. I'm telling you, this is sort of like a favor, like, your agent may not know about this.
Feel free to use that.
Feel free to, raise it with them, or call Berta, whatever.
So educating, establishing expertise.
No, the Make Me Move is like,
I have a friend that actually used to Make Me Move and he sold his house.
really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
The Make Me Move is something where like you can go on and you can do it yourself, and you can say, hey, people do it as like they put like a price on it that it's higher than what it's worth,
Right.
and they're like, I don't want to move, but if you give me this price, okay. So it's it's like if like you would do it, you say like 800,000 for this house, like you just like, hey, if you really like if somebody just can't live without this house, you can make them move. Maybe 800,000. It's like that's what it's for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the coming soon with Zillow is, and you can do it through the MLS, but the way to do it is through Zillow because you can track all the data about who's clicking and who saves it because they want to look at it again. People can contact you and ask when's it coming live, can I put in an offer now, etc. And you get a lot of data that is really helpful in terms of determining whether pricing. It doesn't take long and it doesn't cost anything. You'll end up with more information than you have. So, and like I said, we do it for every single house that we sell. And we're like pretty confident in the price. But sometimes we're above, as well. And sometimes we're occasionally raising the price based on the feedback we get. So if you were to sell with just like through a traditional agent, you would want to consider sort of the transactional costs, right, of doing so. So
You bought it
in Virginia, do you
remember when it started? It was minute 51.
What, the very
Yeah, this flip or whatever.
it was minute like 50 and 30 seconds.
Okay, and what is it now?
54, 30.
Right, so like that's like 3.5 minutes on basically like the coming soon thing and on the importance of pricing it correctly and like what all the implications are of that. So like that's another thing that I've noticed with his stuff versus what I do. 4 minutes, yeah. Versus what I do and even what I do in that worth like Mark, some of your recordings and stuff, just because I don't want to record so far, is what I do too, is touching on these things too quickly. So he really like drags it out, even like sort of talking slowly and having pauses and like sort of painstakingly like explaining all these things. And again, we'll like script it out, but like be patient and take a lot of time when you're going through this stuff. I think a lot of times we're talking through it so quickly that people aren't really appreciating or understanding it. We're not getting as much mileage out of it as we could.
Yeah, I mean it's it can be a little painful just hearing myself. It is right now, but like in the meeting, like so I do like slow it down, but I think it's necessary. Like that's, I mean, it is very easy just to like drop some great information and just have it go right over their head.
Yeah.
Have zero impact. So you have to like kind of really slow play it, maybe kind of repeat yourself a little bit. You know, pick up on their cues, like if they're like, yeah, I got it, yeah, don't say it again. But oftentimes you have to kind of explain things slower and sort of more painstakingly than you might think for somebody to really like absorb and understand what you're saying.
Sell a house, the buyer is going to pay the majority of the closing costs, but you as the seller will pay 2 closing costs. It's grantor tax and recordation fee. And those are the state's way of sort of taxing you for the service of transferring the deed out of your name into the name of the buyers. And that's about, rough rule of thumb, 2% of the sales price of the house, just for closing costs for the seller. If you had like somebody who was just absolutely head over heels on the house, you could potentially negotiate to have them pay that, but more often than not, that's the portion of this. So that's what will by default go to the seller. And then if you have a realtor, you'll pay whatever the realtor fee is, normally 6%. That is something like Redfin ones and lower.
And most of them around here that I've been talking to have been 5. So.
5%, yeah. So they have, yeah, I think 5% is not bad.
That seems to be kind of common, just based, and I haven't actually talked to realtors, but based on, I have some friends who are realtors, and they said they usually use 5%.
That's good. I think the more commonly is like 6 is kind of like the standard, but there are plenty of agents that will do 5, and I don't know how, they usually will split it up. So the 5% or the 6% is the total commission that you as the seller pay, and then your agent, it's at their discretion how much of that total number they allocate to the buyer agent when they advertise the house for sale. So that can be somewhat meaningful because you can say, they may say 5%, but they may allocate only 1.5 or 2% to the buyer agent. And on the MLS, you can see, every buyer agent can see, okay, what the commission is. 2% is 1.5%.
Okay.
But they can't see what the rest of the commission is. So they don't know what you have, your agent has held aside for themselves. So, there is.
Yeah, so I mean, and the other thing too, so along with like slow and like overly thorough almost, in explaining everything. Like the other thing is just like, it's almost as if like he's like in front of a class and he's teaching like a class on this sort of to like middle schoolers or something like that, I think that's almost like what you should have in your head as you're explaining this stuff. Like it's very authoritative, but it's like very like clear and easy to understand, and it's just like he's really like taking a lot of time to go through this, but he's establishing in this like a lot of expertise, I think, like in her mind, and she's starting to look at him as sort of like an expert who like knows a lot of stuff, which is exactly what we want to do. So yeah, I think that's important. And the other thing too is specifically on the commission thing, so we'll like write that out as well. It's probably worth talking about almost all the time, basically, because especially it also plants seeds of doubt in people for agents who maybe are saying that they'll do it for less commission. Oh, well, you could be screwing yourself because they're going to advertise 2% to the buyer, and no buyer agents are going to want to show your house because they're going to get less money than they would if they sold something else. So they would potentially actively discourage someone against making an offer on your house because they're going to get paid 2% instead of 3%. So it's also just planting that seed and educating them how the whole system works, basically, that other agents probably would never go through. Like, oh, wow, that's like interesting. I didn't think about that. I didn't know that was a thing. And then saying, well, like, watch out for this because this can happen to you. So again, it's sort of like that's the whole sort of place we're coming from.
Yeah, and anytime you can like pull the curtain back, most people know that you pay commission to an agent. Most people have heard 6% or have like a vague idea of kind of how that works. But if you can explain it, almost nobody I think is going to know that the property is advertised on the MLS and only shows what the buyer is getting, and it's at the discretion of the seller's agent to determine how much that is. So that's a piece of information that you're sort of like revealing, and I think most people will find that interesting and they won't know that. And I can't imagine other agents.
It's almost like telling a secret.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of inside baseball. right? Like, cause hey, we're not trying to like sell you on anything. We're just here. Like we're not sure this is doesn't seem like it's a great fit for us to buy for cash, and we've listed houses for amount of time, but that's not really what we do. So I'm here. I'm gonna share stuff with you, like inside baseball stuff. I don't know. Have you heard agents? Do agents go over that stuff, like the commission split?
Not unless you're down to the listing agreement, that's where you're.
Yeah.
It's in it, you have to spell it out there.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
That's smart.
Some benefit there. I think.
Right, so like
understanding
some
that you don't
benefit
need
there.
To kind of
Just,
figure out what are you allocating?
slow talking
to
and stuff
buyer
is
agent?
a big thing.
Remember low and slow.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it does make a difference if you have 3% allocated to the buyer agent. I think they're more likely to start a house.
Yeah, somehow I'm still talking about this.
Right, like, can you pause again? Right, so like for me, I would have just said, I would have said it in like 10 seconds. I would have said, so the selling, the 6% total commission is what's typical, and then it's split typically between the listing agent and the buying agent. And then if you give the buying agent less commission, like if it's 5% only total, I don't want to give the whole thing, but like I would have said it like a third of the time or whatever. But that's something that I'm going to do differently as well, is just take a lot more time going through it and just go through it more slowly. And also just expands the time you're with them, because we're trying to get to 2 hours. So like, let's use all the tricks that we can think of is the other big thing I noticed too, is like, we want to get to that like 2 hour mark. So like, just talk slow and kind of repeat yourself a little bit and like over explain.
What if you feel like you're kind of, well, I guess it wouldn't matter if you've got great rapport, but I was gonna say, kind of wearing out your welcome.
Yeah, we have to, I think, adjust accordingly. Like if the person like is obviously kind of like, okay, yeah, like I like
Yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
okay, yeah,
I got to 90 minutes yesterday.
that's good.
And they were volunteering a lot of things. But they got 5 kids from 6 months to 16. So they've got a busy house.
Yeah. So you have to. That's where you have to use, just your judgment and know when to move it along. But wherever possible, you want to try to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, don't force, this woman lives by herself, her kids are grown, she was happy to talk with me. In a situation like that, I would not, you have to pick up on the cues. But you still want to, you don't want to fly, you don't want to like totally take the bait on that though. I think you want to like explain the things that you really need to explain still. It doesn't have to be as painstaking as this, but don't like just fly through everything because they're rushing you through it either. If it's a really key point, you want to slow down and make it, even in a situation like that.
Right. And in my case, just to take like a few seconds on this, because I wasn't quite sure how to dot all the I's, cross all the T's with the contract here. I wasn't expecting an 18-page document. So I need to go over that. So, but what I did do is I booked another appointment.
That's
yeah,
great.
exactly.
That's great.
Yeah, that's right. That's perfect. And that's what you should be doing.
When they're both present. When it's a couple and there's 2 decision makers, you have to have them both there.
Definitely.
When you're setting the appointment, are you setting kind of the agenda, or it's an email, voice, whatever? How long? This is going to take a couple of hours?
No, because people are going to freak. They're not going to take it if that's the case. So I think usually what we say, 15, 20 minutes.
20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And so, yes, I mean, but it's rare, especially with the people that we're dealing with who are generally like less sophisticated people, or maybe they're older and they're retired or something. They have a super like hard deadline on stuff. So we just try to get because if people won't take the appointment.
I'll set aside 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
For Roberta.
All right, so we got like another couple of minutes. Do you want to we'll just keep playing?
Yeah.
Let's go with it.
And so, so I think with closing costs and commission, it's 7 to 8% is a fair estimate of what will come off at the top at closing, and then whatever's owed, and then what's left you'll just have to check. So you said, what do you owe on the house?
386.
Okay, so let's say if you sold it for 700 on the nose,
Okay.
then you would net depending on what the commission was, about $645 to $650 after closing costs and commission.
Okay.
And then minus $386. You would have a check at closing for about $260. Is what you would actually want that way. So when we buy houses, we don't charge commission. We're
You have to pay yourselves?
we're trying to pay ourselves, but not in that way. Yeah. You could. I would be happy to do it, but yeah, we pay your closing costs. So, but if you sell to an investor, whether it be me or any other investor, there should be no commissions, and they should pay your closing costs. But even assuming that 7 or 8%, I still wouldn't be able to pay you what you would net. You're always going to net a little bit more on the market. Always.
That was my assumption.
Yeah, so I mean, that's another thing, right, is that like, even on the investment side, and this one is more of an investment deal, even on the investment side, he's clearly pointing out what the negative is to selling to an investor. So again, like just by when you point out both sides, like, and this is basically just really explaining everything without really like trying to push one thing or another. It's really just explaining it, both sides, a positive and a negative. So that it goes a long way towards establishing the trust in the relationship.
And this is a person who's free with it, pretty sophisticated, so she's going to be somebody who's inclined to appreciate the transparency around all the numbers. She can probably figure them out herself. And so you're just sort of laying it out, and then she can sort of evaluate, in a no pressure setting, what is it? Is it worth it to her to sell it and not have to finish the work she's doing on the house, blah, blah, blah. And there's like zero pressure on her. And at this point, I was trying for cash, but I felt like both were in play. So I was just trying to kind of keep it as neutral as possible.
So yeah, so we'll put some of the scripting stuff together, like on the pricing conversation that he had and some of the other like key things, and then we'll share with you guys. And then we should definitely just memorize that stuff and just have it available. And we'll keep trying to compile like more and more stuff that like we know is working that you can just have and throw in where it makes sense.
How did you conclude that meeting?
So that one, I wasn't totally sure like where her head was at in terms of what she wanted to do. Like I thought it was going to be cash, even if she never really expressly said that. So I told her that I would give her a call later that day with a specific number. She was leaving to go like music lesson, and I called her, and then she thought about it. We spoke again the next day, and we agreed on a number over the phone. So I wasn't. She had to go, number one, so I didn't like leave it on her. And number two, I was probably like 60-40 in favor of it. I thought it would go cash, but I still thought there was a real chance it would be a listing too. So I tried to just keep it as like neutral as possible and leave it where we she still needed to get more information from me, like the offer and what have you, and then she was still very curious about it. So we talked on the phone later that day, the next day, and then she agreed. So
To what? The cash or the
Cash.
listing?
Cash.
Okay.
What was her reason for selling?
she is retired. She does like consulting part-time and moving closer to her kids who live in the Midwest. She can do her consulting anywhere, so she'll live in the area.
And she has no urgency. She has no distress.
No distress. So taking less cash on the house on the offer side wasn't a big deal for her. Knowing that the cash offer was going to be less than the retail net.
She just didn't really. She was like changing the carpets out. Like she was doing work to the house, and I think she was just kind of like, well, if I do this, I don't have to do all that stuff, and I'll get a little bit less money, but then know what to do on it. So,
You're in trouble with it.
so
You just didn't feel like it?
I think she just preferred, she would have done it, I think she would have done it, but, and she had already started to do it. I think she was just like, this is sort of like good enough. And I'd rather not do it, so I'll do that.
Right, and she'll give up some money.
Yeah.
For the convenience. Yeah. All right, cool.
Stop.